Eagles Entertainment.
The journey to the draft is driven by AAA. AAA, roadside is their strong side. Make AAA a part of your game day today. AAA, go ahead.
With the 25th pick in the NFL Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles select.
You're listening to the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA.
Welcome to the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA. I'm Fran Duffy, and today, we're once again back here in Mobile, Alabama, from our hotel room, myself and Chris McPherson. We're going to give you all the action from today. First day of practice here in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. We've got weigh-ins to talk through. We've got some players that are not participating that made some headlines today, so we'll talk through that as well. But at the very top of the show, let's get right into it. We're going to talk to the Eagles' Assistant Director of College Scouting, Alan Walking, who's been with the Eagles now for a handful of years. He does outstanding work, and he covers the Southeast for the Eagles as well. So we're going to talk to him about really the entire All-Star game process. I actually talked with him last week at the East-West Shrine Bowl. So just talking about last week's All-Star games, obviously this one this week. What goes into that from a scouting standpoint? What is it like for those guys when they come back off the road, they go to these All-Star games? What goes into it? So we're going to hit all of that with Alan at the top of the show in Mr. Relevant. After that, let's get into what we're talking about here at the Senior Bowl. We've got Draft Buzz. C-Mac and I are going to cover all the things that happened this morning at the weigh-in. So we're going to cover some of the big news that came from that, and then some of the measurements that matter from that weigh-in event. After that, pick six. C-Mac going to go through six players that really stood out to us during the day's worth of practice in the afternoon. We've got an unofficial visit from UCLA running back Josh Kelly. I promise you, that is an entertaining interview that you do not want to miss to wrap things up. But all that being said, we're going to get into the top of the show with Mr. Relevant. But first, again, to throw us your support, best way to give us some love here on the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA, is to go on to Apple Podcasts or Stitcher. Leave us a rating, leave us a comment. It's the best way to help boost us up the rankings a little bit. Give us a little bit of love as draft season starts to kick into full gear. All right, let's get to the top of the show. It's time for Mr. Relevant with our own Alan Walking.
It's time for Mr. Relevant.
Really happy to welcome into the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA, our friend Alan Walking. Alan, welcome to the show, man. First time.
Thank you very much, Fran.
Yeah, you got it, man. So we're down here at the East-West Shrine Bowl, and I just want to kind of give fans a peek behind the curtain at what it's like for a scouting staff going to these events and, what happens at these things, because they only hear what we put out on the podcast from a content standpoint, but obviously so much more goes into it. So just kind of big picture, for you guys, when you guys are on the road, you're seeing these guys all year round, from the spring to the summer through the fall up to now. How is this live exposure different from the exposure that you get to see throughout the course of the rest of the year?
Yeah, so, in the fall, the guys really write the resume. It's done on tape with the level of play. It's done through their 4 years with the way they practice, how they establish their habits. And then we're kind of sent into the schools to extract that information. So in the fall, you're kind of just trying to create baselines on every guy. You leave there with an idea of what guys are and what the question marks are. And this is kind of the first part of being able to either confirm what we saw on tape or answer some questions and things like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, so how often is there a guy, obviously you've got guys that are in your area. I think a lot of the media over the last few years especially, it kind of blows up and they say like, a Giant scout was seen talking to this player and an Eagle scout was seen talking to this guy. Yeah. What are those conversations? What is happening after practice ends and scouts are talking to players? Obviously it differs from team to team, from player to player, but what's happening in those instances?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. A lot of us, we really... You want to cover as many guys as you can. So when media outlets kind of say, hey, the Eagles were talking to so-and-so, sometimes it might indicate a level of interest, but a lot of times, we really want to cover guys. And maybe it creates interest, but sometimes it's more just we're casting a large net, especially this early in the process.
It's information gathering, right? You're just kind of checking boxes, making sure, okay, if there was this information we didn't have on this guy, we want to just make sure we've got it now.
That's right. And then, there's something really important about hearing a guy talk through his background in his own words.
Yeah.
We'll get that information from the school, and depending on the continuity of the staff, they may not have an in-depth understanding of where the kid comes from.
Yeah.
So when he talks about his home life, his decision to enroll in that school, what things have been like for him, it really sheds a lot of light on the prospect and some of the information that we got in the fall, because everything in the fall, for the most part, is third hand.
Yeah. So how often, I know every school is different in how they handle it, how often have you talked to these guys before we get to this point?
At the smaller schools, there's more exposure to the players.
Got it. Okay.
At the larger schools, it's game week. If you're there
Yeah,
for Tuesday,
right.
it matters if they can beat whoever they're playing Saturday.
Right.
So you don't want to be a distraction. So you have less opportunity at those schools. But say you go into a D3 school or something like that, those people make sure they go out of the way to showcase the kid, give you an
Right.
opportunity to talk to him.
Right. So this is kind of your first opportunity in some cases to get some face-to-face time with the guy and kind of talk to him. Tell me when you're watching practice, without giving away any of the secret sauce, obviously, for what we're trying to do. What are you looking for? Are there? I know I've talked with people where it's like, oh, we're watching mannerisms, how they compose themselves. Is it how they perform a certain drill? Is it everything? What are you trying to take in when you're watching guys at practice?
The first, when they move, the athlete, right?
Okay.
Like, I think that's, I think for all of us, that's the first ingredient you start with. So it's evaluating the athlete, the movement, the competitor. What's the urgency level, and then kind of beyond that, it's the stamina. How quickly are they learning things? How quickly are they advancing through the week?
Yep.
Those all kind of are relevant in this exposure.
How long does it take you to kind of learn how to grade and evaluate the athlete? Where now every guy doesn't look the same, and now you're able to kind of differentiate, okay, this guy's a good athlete, this guy's a great one, this guy's a bad one, this guy's a solid one. How long did that take you?
You're saying as an evaluator?
Yeah, as an
how long
evaluator.
in this
Yeah,
exposure?
as an evaluator.
Oh, I think for all, everybody learns at different levels, just like
Right.
in everything.
Yep.
I'm probably a slower learner than most, but it's all building a catalog. So
Sure.
the more times you see guys,
Right.
the more opportunities you have to compare guys who have been with our team and successful, or you see them go other places, you say, hey, this is a reference point. And the more data points you have, it just makes you a more potent scout, I think.
Sure. All right. So take me through the one point that we get to see it at the Senior Bowl. We don't see it at the other All-Star games. Is the weigh-in process earlier in the week.
Yeah.
What happens at that point? Give the listeners a little bit of a peek behind the curtain into that part of the process.
Yeah, so the guys, they come up onto a stage. They announce hand, arm, and wing, which are all measurements. Just kind of give us an indication of the length, height, all that stuff.
Yep.
They step on a scale. And then we apply it into our database, which gives us kind of where they fall on certain thresholds.
Sure.
Is this guy in the what percentile of a position group, which kind of maybe helps direct us to if they have an NFL body type, things like that.
Sure. And so there's 2 practices a day at all these events. Here it's East and West. Next week it'll be North and South. What happens before practice with you guys? What happens between and then after?
So, the preamble to all this is really the weigh-ins, right? And then
Yep.
the after practice, it's a lot of interviews. So everything that you see that's conducted here on field,
Yep.
you get to do that again at the Players Hotel. You sit down, you can sit at a table, you give them a piece of paper, they can draw up concepts, they can walk you through things. So really you're getting to know guys. And not only just the personality, it's the how they learn, and that you're always trying to flesh out the background.
Sure. Yeah. Just whenever we draft a player, you hear often, when we talked about the Senior Bowl, we got this from him. We kind of knew at that point this was a guy we wanted to target. I know from this game a couple of years ago, Avonte Maddox was a guy that they thought really stood out here during this week of practice. Is there a player that kind of comes to mind from your standpoint that that went on to have success with the Eagles that you've seen in these kind of all-star settings?
Maddox is a great example.
Okay.
He was one of those guys when you talk about the athlete.
Yep.
From the first practice here, the twitch, the explosion, the way he moved, he looked different than the people that were in his group.
Yeah.
And so, he goes through the weigh-ins. You say, hey, look, he maybe falls into percentages that would be below some of the thresholds we would like. And then you watch the guy move and you say, hey, he's got X amount of ability in his body to compensate for maybe some of the size restrictions.
Sure.
So he's a great example. At this game we've had Joe Osman was a good player here.
Yep.
Cravon was a great player
Right.
here.
Yeah, a few years ago.
I think all those guys you liked coming out of fall, and they came here and they showed it to you again. And so it's another exposure that kind of helps solidify your opinion on them.
Yeah, everyone talks, about all the stages of this process. There's a piece to it that's all important. When I come to these games, it's kind of the same thing where it's like, okay, you have the interview segment. Certainly, that's a big part of it. On field, certainly a big part of it. Is there an individual part of practice? Is it one-on-one drills? Is it warm-ups where you got to get a sense of the guy's body, how the guy runs around? Is there a part of it on field that you're like, yeah, this is the part that gives me the most juice as an evaluator?
One-on-ones are pretty hard
Yeah.
to beat, right? Because
Right.
it's an isolated competition,
Yep.
and you can really evaluate a guy without having any interference from maybe players that play at a different level of play that are at an adjacent position.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. No, it's a fun process. We like it every year on the Journey to the Draft podcast. Alan, we're going to let you get back to work. Practice is getting ready to start here at the Trop. But appreciate the time here on the Journey to the Draft podcast. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Fran.
I hope you really enjoyed that interview with Alan Walking. It was a lot of fun to kind of catch up with him last week at the East-West Shrine Bowl. And it is great to be able to see all these Eagle scouts that are on the road over the course of the football season, really the majority of the calendar year. Those guys are out of the building. They are not in Philadelphia. So being able to catch up with those guys here at this event or at previous All-Star Game events like the East-West Shrine Bowl is always a lot of fun. Great part of the process. Not just the guys with the Eagles, but from around the league, guys that we know from our travels over the last few years. All right, let's get to the next part here of the show. It's time for Draft Buzz.
Now it's time for Draft Buzz.
All right, so I teased it earlier in Draft Buzz here today, C-Mac, as we welcome in Chris McPherson to the show.
Hello, everyone.
We're going to talk through the weigh-ins this morning, and a lot of interesting news to come out of it, and a couple, I'll say, bummers to start things off.
You were so disappointed. You reminded me of a little boy who on Christmas morning didn't get the gift that he wanted.
Oh, I wouldn't go that far. I mean, there's still look. There's a lot of so the news was a lot of the players that aren't here or that are not participating, and most of them we knew, right? Like, so we knew that there were 3 guys that declined invitations, and that's actually a pretty low number. They're in years past. I can think back to years ago. We're talking that number's in double digits. And so to only have 3, I think, is a testament to Jim Nagy and his crew and what they did in recruiting. But Derek Brown from Auburn, stud. Trayvon Diggs, corner, Alabama, stud.
You
Capital
love
S.
him. You love him.
Joe Burrow, Heisman winner.
Yeah.
Future number 1 pick.
Which
likely.
it's funny because some rumblings at the Senior Bowl practices made it sound like if there was another week in between,
Right.
maybe he would have made the
there
trip
was a
down
shot.
there.
Yeah,
There was a shot. But
So with those 3 guys declined invitations. Then we had a bunch that accepted invitations at some point in the process, but had to pull out. But a lot of those guys we knew about, right? So now it's really the ones that were surprises were the ones that we saw that were late. So Brian Edwards, the wide receiver from South Carolina, Jordan Brooks, the linebacker from Texas Tech, who I've heard some top 50 buzz over the last few weeks. I don't know if it's kind of interesting. And then Jeff Gladney, the talented corner from TCU that I'm a big fan of as well. Then we had a couple of other no-shows, by the way, that were not talked about this morning, but were not at weigh-ins. And these were just guys that I kind of knew about that Jim Nagy did not mention. Raekwon Davis, the defensive lineman from Alabama. I know that they were really, really excited to have him come to the game, and he's not here. Trey Adams, the left tackle from Washington, was not discussed. It was a big loss.
For him
and
this
then,
week.
no question. And then Christian Fulton, the corner from LSU. Now, that was reported. I did see that in the media. The other 2 may have been in the media as well, but Christian Fulton, I think that there was first of all, they played a 15-game season, number 1. Number 2, he said there's some kind of nagging injury, and then there was a family issue as well. So all 3 of those guys not here. The big one that I don't think most of the people in the room at the weigh-ins were aware of going into this were 5 guys that failed physicals. So they get down here to Mobile. They're actually going to they're participating in the event. They were here for media. They're doing stuff with teams. They did the weigh-ins. They just cannot practice. They were not cleared to officially go. Those 5 names, and it's 5 good players that I was excited to see. Prince Tega Wanogo, the left tackle from Auburn, really athletic kid that we talked about on the preview show last week. Brandon Ayuk, the wide receiver from Arizona State.
You were crushed about this one.
That's a bummer. I had high hopes for Brandon Ayuk this week. Ashton Davis, the talented, very athletic safety from Cal, former corner with a track background who can play the ball in the air. And then Lecky Fotu as well, the nose tackle from Utah. We saw his teammate, John Pennicini, last week. A ton of Utah Utes here in attendance. Fotu, I talked to him at Media Day today. Really fun player to talk to. But Fotu
Another note with
here.
him that you got at Media Day was his teammates and what they said about him.
Yeah. So I went around and talked to a bunch of players today, and talking to some of the Utah guys. I've been asking some of the same questions to all of them, and one of them was if you could bring one of these guys with you, one guy off the Utah defense with you to the NFL, who are you bringing? And all those guys outside of Lecky said, "Oh, I'd bring Lecky Fotu," and I say, "Why?" They say, "Oh, he eats up blocks. He allows me to make plays." So I go to Lecky at the end, and I said, "Hey, all of your teammates here told me that they want to bring you with you. Like, who do you want to bring?" And I'm thinking, is it going to be Bradley Anai? Is it going to be Julian Blackman? Is it going to be Francis Bernard? Nope. John Pennicini. So
Guy who's not here.
If you were listening to the Shrine Bowl podcast last week, and Pennicini every single day making plays, one-on-ones at the Shrine Bowl, that's the guy that Lecky Fotu would have brought with him. So Lecky Fotu cannot go. Tremaine Ankrum, the right tackle from the Clemson Tigers, also on that failed physical list. Now, we don't know what those issues are. I think there might be some reports out there on a couple of these guys. They're going to be made official at the end of the week when they release out the report on all the guys that got hurt during the week. So Jim Nagy explained that that'll all be released at some point. I don't know if that's going to go to the media or just go to teams, but that's what Jim Nagy kind of talked through from an injury standpoint. And C-Mac, I know you wanted to kind of hit on some of the measurements that I felt kind of mattered.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is guys are listed a certain way by their colleges.
Yep.
Scouts get to visit the campuses and get a general sense of whether those measurements are in the correct range. Some schools like Alabama will actually have scouts do heights and weights, so you have a real sense of those guys, what they're listed is what's going to be true. Some schools infatuate and inflate the numbers a little bit, and it could lead to some disappointment on weigh-in day.
So what happens is back in the spring, and really it actually starts not that far from now, like in the next month and a half, every school holds what's called a junior timing day, okay? And that's where all the guys that are going to be draft eligible next year, they go through a full battery of tests. That's basically a pro day for those guys. They'll do heights and weights and 40 times and shuttles and everything. And what then will happen is that they supply some of that info to NFL scouts, and there's the two scouting services, National Football Scouting and Blesto, and all those services feed the 32 NFL teams. Some teams, as you mentioned, some teams allow scouts to run those drills like a pro day. So Alabama, for instance, as you mentioned, is one that they'll let scouts come in. They do the timing, they do the measuring, they do everything. So those times are now all verified for scouts and for teams all through the season, their final season on campus. Other teams are estimated. So basically, that's when the school gives the scouts, hey, we had our junior timing day last week. Here are our numbers. And so you might get those, and you're like, all right, these are probably right, but we don't really know for sure. And then you obviously have the time or the heights and weights that are listed on the school website, and those really can't be trusted. So, some guys, I think there were some that were really, really surprised, I think, in the media today. I think if you had an idea of what the scouts saw, I don't think there were too many huge variances today, but a couple of really quick ones just that kind of stood out to me, and guys that really looked the part. I would say the quarterbacks, Justin Herbert, Jordan Love, everyone makes a big thing about hand size. Both guys passed that test. Both guys looked good physically today at weigh-in, so you get that out of the way. Two wide receivers that just looked the part, like when they walked out on stage. Chase Claypool from Notre Dame, Antonio Gandy-Golden. Both are bigger guys. Claypool came in over 6'4" and a quarter. Golden came in at 6'3" and a half. Both guys over 220 pounds. Both guys just ripped from top to bottom. Just really, really well-built, well-defined kids.
With Claypool, I actually spoke with him at Media Day because we talked about this on the preview podcast about, he was more of a tight end and, why is he going as a wide receiver? And he flat out said, look, his skill set, his best skill set is catching the ball. And, even though you'll have teams that utilize tight ends more as predominantly pass catchers, he just feels that he's not a guy who's really going to line up and block on the line of scrimmage.
Sure.
So he feels that with that big frame that he has, because I don't know if you have what exactly he came in at, but
he came in at 6'0", so 6'4" and 3/8.
Yeah.
229 pounds, so just under 230. 33-inch long arms, 80-inch wingspan. I mean, it's a big size. He's a big kid. He's a good sized kid.
And knows how to be the go-to target in a passing offense. So checks the boxes there. AGG, Antonio Gandy-Golden, physical blocker during the the South team practice,
yeah?
or the North team. I'm sorry, they were the second practice today. So the North team practice in the afternoon, they were doing a wide receiver DB run blocking drill where the receivers had to come up and show if they're going to be willing to block at the line of scrimmage. And a couple times, you just kept looking like, who's number 11? Who's number 11?
Yeah.
Antonio Gannon Goldie
All right, I like that.
was ready to get after it. So
That's good to hear.
Not one of my players of the day, but something to check, kind of take note of, when you're evaluating him moving forward.
And I know that there are some people that might hear me say, like, that's good to hear, and, like, roll their eyes, like, oh, who cares about a receiver's ability to block? It's not necessarily about that. It's about knowing that he's tough enough to do it because I'll tell you what, he's going to have to play special teams. And as a backup receiver early in his career, I think he's got starting potential. I think we've talked about that in the show throughout the fall. I think this guy can be a top 3 receiver for an NFL team. Chances are he's not going to be a top 3 receiver for an NFL team next year. So if he's going to be active on game day, he's got to play special teams. I actually talked to him today too, and I asked him, I said, when was the last time he played special teams? He hasn't played since his freshman year. So this is a guy that's not active in that part of the game. To show that he's got that toughness, I think will go a long way.
Fun to watch. He was definitely the standout to watch from that standpoint.
I like that. All right. So it's funny you mentioned Gandy Golden because to me, you look at small school guys at the weigh-ins, it's always important for those guys to kind of show up and just kind of see, like, what are we working with here? Is this a guy that physically dominated his level of competition, or is he kind of raw and underdeveloped, obviously coming from a lower level? The weight room, the weight program isn't always going to be the best. 2 small school linemen that impressed me in person.
Okay.
I'll tell you what, like the measurables on Alex Taylor, the offensive tackle from South Carolina State, 6'8.5", 308 pounds, 11-inch hands, like dinner plate hands, okay? 36-inch long arms, 88-inch wingspan. This guy is huge and got light feet. I watched his film. His film is really impressive. He's raw, but he's got really impressive tools. Was a college basketball player. I forget where he started, C-Mac. He committed to a larger school and transferred out once the position coach left. And he said, you know what, I'm going to go give basketball a try. And he actually played basketball at South Carolina State. He got on the campus there, and the football coach was like, Alex, like, you got to come play football for me too. You want to play both sports, that's fine, but you got to come play football. They convinced him to come play, and he's been a 2.5, I believe, year starter at South Carolina State, same school that produced Darius Leonard a couple years ago. They sent Javon Hargrave a couple of years ago to this game. So the South Carolina State program has a history of sending players to this game and then having future NFL success. Alex Taylor, a little bit further away than those 2 guys were, but really, really impressive player. And then Ben Barch from St. John's, I thought really looked the part. He's not as well-defined. He doesn't have quite the physical traits that Alex Taylor does, but looked like someone you could definitely work with for sure.
So a couple notes on those guys. Taylor, 101 O-line, D-line.
Okay.
Was able to hold his ground and swallow up some of the pass rushers on one rep, another rep. He was able to swiftly use those feet to ride his opponent wide to get him out of the way of the quarterback. So it was impressive in a one-on-one O-line, D-line. Ben Barch spoke to him after practice, and he was saying, I'm always intrigued by how does a guy end up at a Division III St. John's when the guy's now on the cusp of making it to the NFL. And he said, was just not highly recruited, where he's, a true 6. How tall is he? He's about 6.
I have to look at what his number was.
I wanted to say 6'4", 6'3", 6'4", true 6'3", 6'4". 6'4" is what initially popped in mind. I thought he might be taller. But in high school, going to college, he was only 220 pounds. So he would be waking up to make these concoctions at 5 a.m, and it sounded disgusting. It was like eggs and Gatorade and all this different protein stuff all mixed together, and he would just chug the thing down to be able to put on weight. And he's now over 300 pounds. So he's gained 80 plus pounds since enrolling at St. John's. So kudos to him. And like you said, wears it well, and it shows up on the field.
Yeah, former tight end. Was a tight end at St. John's up until 18, I believe, is when he made the switch. So
That's crazy.
he's only been playing O-line for a couple of years, and that's why you have some people that are very excited about him. Last two guys, both are edge players that really stood out. First of all, Jonathan Grenard from Florida. I thought he just looked the part. He checked in from a length standpoint that came out well. He's got what's called a great bubble, C-Mac. People talk about the bubble butt. Why is that important? When you talk about a guy's power, it all comes from a guy's butt. And so, having that bubble, that base to be able to work with for a guy who's a speed rusher, that factors in. You're going to see that bubble show up in like the 10-yard split at the combine. You're going to see that with his explosive first step on the field to show that he's got that power in his body to be able to kind of move people against their will. I think that bodes well for him in the future as well.
All about the base.
No
it's all about
question.
the base.
No, thank you. That's very well done. The other big one, I would say coming in, the one I was most interested to see was Wisconsin linebacker Zach Bond, because you talk about, we talked earlier about those spring timing days, those junior timing days. Zach Bond, back in the spring, scouts had, from what I had heard, it was in the 220s in terms of his weight. 220, you're not playing on the edge. You're not playing as a down on the line of scrimmage on an every down basis. He came in at 240 today. Watching this guy on film leading up to this event, I thought he was a really savvy pass rusher. He gave good effort on the point of attack in the run game. But if he came in at under 230 pounds, I would just have a hard time believing that he could be an edge player. He would have to move off the ball. At 240, I think you can work with something there. I think this guy, he's probably not a fit in a scheme like the Eagles. I think he's more of a 3-4 outside linebacker, a Sam linebacker. But to me, this guy, all right, this shows that he belongs in that edge group. So those are the measurements that I felt were most impressive to me, the guys that stood out in the way. And now let's get into our next segment of the show. It's time for Pick Six. C-Mac and I are going to go through 6 guys that stood out to us during the first day of practice.
Now it's time for Pick Six.
All right, C-Mac, I'm going to let you kick things off here for Pick Six.
So
who is the one player? And let me real quick before we get into this. Look, Senior Bowl. I'm taking a little bit of a different approach this year. I think a lot of people, you'll go to a lot of websites, a lot of Twitter accounts, a lot of podcasts this week that might say, here are the list of guys that all these guys that stood out had great days, and these guys had bad days. I'm going to tell you that it's impossible to be able to watch every player, every down, and get a great sense of who was great and who was not. It's just, you can't do it.
Little different here because they offer you access to the film.
Well, that's going to be my thing, though, is that we're going to go. So my goal is that we're doing this on Tuesday night. We're going to talk about Tuesday practices. My goal is that Wednesday morning, we're going to get into that film room. We're going to dive into the film. And so that Wednesday's podcast for Draft Buzz, we'll kind of go through some of our findings from the notes from the previous day's show. From the previous day's practice. So that's my plan. But until they do that, we're just going to go through observations, some guys that stood out, because I tried to focus in on a couple position groups at each practice, so I didn't take in every player or every position group or every drill, but just some guys that stood out. That was my strategy coming in.
And usually, if there's 7-on-7 and O-line, D-line going on,
you take 7-on-7, I'll take O-line, D-line.
Yeah, we're splitting it up. So there's no way that at least one of us is covering each part, but we're not able to see every single one. So.
Exactly. All right, so who's your first player?
All right, so you mentioned him already, Jonathan Grenard out of Florida.
Yeah.
You mentioned the quick first step. There was one rep during a team period where either he was offsides or he so perfectly timed the snap count that he just blew right past the right tackle and was at the quarterback. Couple other O-line, D-line one-on-one had a nice variety of moves, had a nice spin move on one rep, had a bull rush on another. Like you said earlier, looked the part. Just someone who every time you looked at the O-line, D-line drills was flashing. Team drills was able to get into the backfield. Overall, just I thought put a nice practice together. And this is both North and South. We're talking about both teams' practices here. He gets a check mark for me here for the first guy who stood out for me.
Can I tell you that snap anticipation that was on film as well? He was. I remember when the Eagles drafted Derek Barnett a couple of years ago. Everybody said this guy is wired into the snap count. Jonathan Grenard is the guy who's locked into the snap count. All right, my next guy, I'm actually going to stay in the same position group.
Okay.
Opposite team. I'm going to go Jason Strobridge from North Carolina. From the jump, this guy was really impressive. And in team drills, he was all over the place. One-on-ones, run game, pass game. for the most part, could not be stopped. He was really, really good at the point of attack in the run game. I went over to one-on-ones. They were doing some point of attack drills over in the far end zone, walked over. My first rep that I saw, he locked up the offensive lineman and the D-line coach, who was very vocal. I'll just use it that way. It was very vocal during practice today. Very colorful. Was adamant. What a great job he did, and was yelling at all the D-linemen. That's how it should look. That's how it should look.
Well, that's a good way
and
to
then
determine it.
just from pass rush drills, he was really good. He worked both inside and outside. I think he offers that versatility. Was a defensive tackle for most of his time in North Carolina. We were talking about the variances and weigh-ins. He was listed in the 280s by North Carolina, which is a small D tackle. And as soon as he got confirmed for the game, Jim Nagy was right away was like, he's an edge. He's going to be a defensive end. And anyone that saw the timing sheets from the spring, he was in the 260s, and he came in 260s today. So a lot of people that didn't see that were like, "Oh, he came in super light. He came in super." Well, that's what he's been playing. He's been playing as a 265-pound defensive tackle on the inside from North Carolina, and he's playing D end here.
There are times where guys will add or lose weight.
No doubt, yes.
And the question with that becomes, how do they play? If it's someone who was fast and quick and they put on weight, are they able to maintain it with the added weight? And some teams may want to see these guys do it. Some might say, you succeeded this way in college. Why are you altering the formula now? But great. I like the call with Strobridge there. You got to see the one-on-one O-line, D-line with him. The team periods I saw, he had some nice pressures in there as well. So definitely a flash during the practice. So my second guy, I'm going to go Troy Pride of Notre Dame. Okay, go O-line or wide receiver DB one-on-ones. Was all over USC's Michael Pittman on one rep. Another one with a pass breakup. James Proche, who you talked about his route.
It is Prochet. I confirmed. It is James Prochet, which I think stock up with the name change.
Yes, Prochet. Definitely agree with that. With Prochet, route running as good as advertised.
Really good snap.
You preview that. You talked about it on the preview podcast. Troy Pride was running with them stride for stride. So I think overall, did a great job in that segment. Showed some toughness. I liked what I saw. Just flashed consistently throughout those
That's not
drills.
the Notre Dame bias coming to the forefront there?
No,
all right.
not at all.
No, this is a big week for him because he's, number one, we've seen a lot of attrition at the cornerback spot leading up to this game. A lot of the top guys not in attendance. He's got the ability. Look, his athleticism is top shelf. So if you're if you're saying who's the best athlete here at the corner spot, it's Troy Pride. And so if he comes out and has a good week of practice, I think that really, really could help boost his stock. We've seen a lot of guys like that go higher than expected based off the film. So Troy Pride, good to hear that he had a good first day. My second name is a guy, and I mentioned earlier with Jason Strobridge, I said, for the most part, was dominant in one-on-ones. One player stopped him multiple times. That was Temple-made center.
Oh, we're talking about biases showing. Jeez. I mean, at least the helmets are Notre Dame are flashy, so you have to notice them.
Yeah, that helmet looks pretty good on Matt Hennessy. But Matt Hennessy, really athletic kid. I thought he battled really well. And like I said, he was the only guy who had any kind of answer for Jason Strobridge inside in one-on-one drills. I know you and I both talked to him separately today between media day and after practice. Good kid. I thought the film was really good. Some people think he could be the best center in the draft. And I'll tell you what, the film was really good, and he had a good first day. Excited to see if he can build on that for the rest of the week.
Yoga, key to his success.
Yeah?
He was looking. I believe after his freshman year, was looking for some added edge, and wasn't even really recommended to him. He kind of was researching, ways to improve his flexibility, and came across yoga, and he said he walked into the studio and was the only guy in there. And you're talking about a guy who's 6'3",
I wonder if he took a class at Temple.
Didn't say where it was.
My wife is a yoga instructor.
Failed at that part.
And her first yoga class ever was taking a Temple yoga class.
I would think that there was a guy that looks like a football player that she might say something.
Yeah, well, that's good stuff right there.
So I like that pick. I actually also went with an interior lineman for my third pick here, Logan Stenberg out of Kentucky.
You liked what you saw from him.
Just stonewalling the pass rushers in the O-line, D-line, one-on-one drills. And it's a drill that's, designed for the defensive lineman to typically win. So when you see the offensive lineman, dominating the way Stenberg was doing during his reps, very impressive to see. So definitely was something that just caught my eye. So he's my third guy.
Yeah, he's a 4-year starter in the SEC, so a guy that's got plenty of game reps under his belt. My third and final one, I went with the guy that I talked about. I forget which show it was, C-Mac, but Dane Jackson, the corner from Pitt. He really reminds me of Jalen Mills, like the way that he's built, the way that he plays. He had 3 pass breakups and one-on-ones today.
He was good too. Yes.
Quick game was all over it. All the pass breakups were in the quick game, but his instincts in man-to-man coverage are really impressive. And then he uses his length to be able to disrupt at the catch point, get the ball on the ground. I thought Dane Jackson had a really impressive first day. He did get beat downfield on one snap that I saw, but he's got the ability to impact the catch point, get the ball on the ground. Just a few other names that I want to throw in there.
Okay.
Just guys that kind of just missed the cut for me.
Let's do it.
Justin Herbert, I think I turned to you at one point and said I think he's the best player on the field right now. He was throwing the ball really, really well. It was a windy day. It was cold. I thought that that obviously he's used to that playing in Oregon, dealing with the elements. He showed up today. I thought he had a really good day of practice. James Prochet, mentioned earlier, I thought he was one of the better receivers that I saw on the day of practice. Jonah Jackson, Ohio State, really a couple Ohio State kids here. Jonah Jackson on the offensive line, a Rutgers transfer, actually from Media, Pennsylvania, by the way.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't know that. Les Bowen all over that one. I did not know that. But Jonah Jackson, I have not watched Jonah Jackson. I thought he had a good session in one-on-ones. Davon Hamilton from Ohio State also had a really good session of one-on-ones as well. Van Jefferson from Florida had a couple of really nice flashes. And then Justin Herron, the left tackle from Wake Forest, played some guard. He had a 1 rep where Strobridge actually forklifted him and got him to the ground. It was actually very ugly. But outside of that, Justin Herron, I thought had some good flashes. He had a really good pancake down the field in a team drill. Had a couple good reps inside as well in one-on-one. So outside of that 1 rep, and that's what I mean when I say, like, there might be some people out there who say Justin Herron was terrible today. He had a terrible day of practice because they saw him get thrown to the ground by Strobridge on 1 rep. But outside of that, I thought he had a pretty good day of practice. So those would be some of the other names that stood out to me.
So a couple other guys I want to note. You mentioned Van Jefferson. The route running was on point. Alohi Gilman, the safety from Notre Dame.
Nice, okay.
I thought flashed in the O-line, wide receiver. Second time I've done that, the wide receiver DB one-on-ones. And Jordan Love, Herbert, you mentioned you thought was the best player on the field. I thought Jordan Love, I loved how he was throwing with anticipation, even with these new receivers who he has no rapport with.
I saw some buzz on Twitter that he had a good day. I honestly didn't notice one way, just because I was watching a lot of trenches in that practice. That I didn't even notice one way or the other. But that's good to hear. This is a guy that Eagles fans are hoping that Jordan Love looks really, really good this week. You want him to go in the top 20. All right, well, that's good stuff. Well, C-Mac, I know that at the media day today, that was the other part of the day that we haven't really talked about too much, was between weigh-ins and practice, we had the media day where we got to talk with a lot of these guys, and you caught up with UCLA running back Josh Kelly. This is today's unofficial visit.
The unofficial visit.
All right, so Josh, first question I have for you. I was intrigued to ask this to you, that in your bio, being from Philly, do you know where I'm going with this? Yes. You think that you'd be the perfect candidate to play Rocky?
Oh, man, yes, absolutely, man. Rocky is one of my favorite films ever, all time growing up. And I think I would be perfect, man, to play that underdog role.
Why did you consider yourself an underdog?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, considering I was a walk-on at UCLA, wasn't the most highly recruited guy out of high school. So, man, I kind of embraced it, and Rocky, he just gave me inspiration and motivation, definitely.
When was the first time you saw the movie? Do you remember?
I remember the first time I seen it was I was 8th grade. So I was about 13 at the time, and I was like, man, I want to go work out right after this. It was that inspirational, man. I loved it.
What is it about the film? What is it about Rocky that inspired you, that you felt like you connect with so much?
Definitely his just underdog mentality and the fact that, he was really overlooked a lot, whether it's people in his neighborhood or, even the boxer Apollo Creed, just people just overlooking him. And I just thought it was amazing how, his work ethic, his relentlessness, and his toughness, I resonated with that.
You ever been to Philly?
I've never been to Philly. I always wanted to go.
Just to see statues. Run the Art Museum steps.
Exactly.
Got posed with statues. So,
yeah.
Hopefully, if you come on a top 30 visit, down the line, that could be a possibility. But why do you think you were overlooked coming out of high school?
Oh, man. I honestly think, I really wasn't as good. I was a good football player at the time, but, I got a lot better now, especially being in college, being around good coaches, good system. I for sure got better, and my technique really improved.
Do you think that you wouldn't have become the player and person you are today if you weren't overlooked?
Oh yeah, I definitely want to be where I'm at right now. I feel like that mentality that I had really just made my work ethic really impeccable. Just made my dedication and love for the game even better.
What is your first memory of playing the game?
Oh my goodness, my first memory. So I was 12 years old at the time, and I just remember like my very first play was me just getting ran over. I played defense at the time, so I got ran over, and it taught me real quick that this game is not easy. It's difficult and it's hard, but it teaches you adversity, man. So that was my earliest memory.
You wanted more after it, though.
Exactly, I did.
A lot of guys, even pro players, they'll have experience where like, oh, I got beat bad the first time. And it was like, Mom or Dad, I'm out, and then someone kept them in to keep it going. So, what is it that you love about the game of football?
Man, I just love the whole contact aspect of it. Honestly, like I love how violent and physical the game is. That drove me in quickly when I was young. I was like, I love this about football. And when you play as you get older and older, guys are so much competitive. They're even faster, bigger, stronger, and I just love it, man. Just competition.
Proudest moment from your time at UCLA?
Oh, proudest moment. Man, I think getting to build relationships, definitely with my teammates, with the coaching staff. There's a lot of people that I'm going to talk to for the rest of my life. And that was definitely the most proudest moment I have there.
As you said, Josh, before we started the interview, you're kind of soaking in all the atmosphere of this whole experience. What do you want to showcase to the coaches and scouts who are in attendance this week?
I definitely want to showcase my versatility on third down, whether that's just better in pass protection, whether being better off the backfield and catching the ball against separation. Definitely that's what I want to do this week.
Josh, who are the guys around the league that you look at and say, oh, I want to pick so-and-so's vision, his ability to play on third down? Who are those guys?
Definitely Ezekiel Elliott, obviously.
Don't want to say that in Philly, but...
I know, right? But yeah, man, he's a baller. He does everything well. I mean, you got guys like Christian McCaffrey, who's just the most versatile back we've seen in a long time. So there's just a lot of guys I really look up to for sure.
Excellent. Josh, fun interview, and again, hope we get to see you again down the road.
Definitely.
So
Thank you so much.
All right, C-Max, so take us through your discussion there with Josh Kelly.
Well, the thing is, you're the one who pointed out that he thinks he would be the perfect person to play Rocky.
I did say that on yesterday's show, I believe.
So when I went up to him, I introduced myself, start the interview, and I just start going into the whole rock, and I could just tell by his face that he was like, I know where you're going. And that's the thing is some guys, you go that you want that playful angle, but if they're not buying it. They just don't get into it. Gregarious personality, easy to talk to, was kind of just soaking in the atmosphere, was just loving the whole experience, and again, you root for the good underdog stories, and he talked about, going from walk-on to on the cusp of being in the NFL. So a lot of fun. But we got a lot of great, interviews in the can today that we're going to use for unofficial visits throughout the rest of the week.
I love the behind the production term within the can for the
in the can, yes, in the can. So. Trying to think of some other notes that stood out. Benjamin, who you think is the best running back in attendance here.
A little bit smaller than I expected.
Nonetheless, some great Herm Edwards stories.
Yeah?
With Edwards being the head coach now at Arizona State, wanted to get some...
he didn't have an impression, did he? Sometimes you get those guys, sometimes you get those players and they've got impressions of Herm Edwards, which was always fun.
No, didn't get that one there. So, just overall, it's great to put a name to the face, or the face to the name, I should say, here of these players, and they get to learn more about their backstories, see some of that personality here. So, again, I'm just taking it all in, learning about a lot of these guys for the first time. So. You start to develop guys you want to, you start to pull
These are
forward.
your guys.
Yeah, exactly.
No, exactly. It's a fun part of the process. We're only just beginning. We've got day one in the books. We've got Wednesday. We've got Thursday here in Mobile, Alabama. We will present you with a couple shows each day here coming up as we close out our coverage of the Senior Bowl. Make sure you tune in for the rest of the week. Again, as a quick reminder, just make sure you give us some love. Apple Podcast, Stitcher, wherever you listen, leave us a rating, leave us a comment. Until then, we will talk to you tomorrow here on the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA.